You're listening to the ASQ Podcast for a transformational approach to life and leadership, blending soul wisdom with modern insight to create outer impact. Hi, Karyn. How are you? Thank you so much for being here with me today on the ASQ Podcast.
I'm so excited. We're going to have a lot of fun, dead or alive.
I
Just saying.
I love it. No pun intended.
Righto,
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm so excited. I purposefully did not do a lot of research on you, and specifically because I wanted to get to know you and have it be a very organic conversation, which is what this is going to be. So we are going to have some fun. So, are you ready to get started?
You say it. Let's just do it.
Let's do it. All right. So on the ASQ podcast, one of the questions that we start all of our episodes with is, where were you pitched? So just want to know more about like where you were born, what's your family structure like?
Sure, that's a good question. So I was born in Niagara Falls, New York. That's why I glow in the dark. This is what I tell everybody because of all the chemicals. Just saying. And no, I don't swim. Let's see. My mom's side, they are very psychic, artistic. As a little girl, my mom would say, "Oh, I see whatever, a train wreck coming up, or there's dead Uncle John." I remember seeing people when I was in my crib. On the flip side of the coin, my father, his side are Mensa members. He was Canadian, great guy, moved to the States, yada, yada, yada. So I have this very odd type of balance. Most people think of psychics as airy fairy, but I also am very grounded and I have a very strong, math and science, foundation. I used to be a stockbroker back in the day, youngest female stockbroker. People don't realize that. So I ride both worlds. So that's my upbringing. A little
Wow.
different. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So how did your parents balance that out? Because they're both from different or have a different background. Like how did that work? What was that?
Um,
What was that like in the house?
Well, and interesting, unfortunately, I was 7 years old. I used to see dead people since I was in my crib, and I would make predictions. I remember this one when Margaret would visit me, and I thought it was normal. But at the age of 7, I started seeing this vision that my father was going to pass. And 3 weeks later, he died suddenly, unexpectedly of a stroke. He was very young.
Oh,
So I
wow.
didn't have a lot of experience with him growing up. But I do recall my father always saying, education is very important. He was an engineer, Mensa member, his entire family. So that side of the family, totally opposite. But
Wow.
they figured it out. Maybe my mother was creative, maybe my father was more logical, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
The yin
totally
and the yang.
different. The yin and the yang, yes,
That's
totally different
funny.
personalities.
Right. Oh, that's unfortunate. So let me ask you this, because you said your mom also has these
Uh-huh.
abilities. Do you think, or have you ever asked her, did she have the same vision or that insight that her husband was going to pass? Or does that make sense?
That's she never discussed it, but my brother, at the time, he was 11 months younger, he had the same vision. So we were
Really?
6 and 7. Yeah, we both had the same vision of my father being laid out in a blue casket. My father was tall, blonde, blue-eyed, Norwegian. My mother, just the opposite, really short, dark hair, dark, you would never think that, we were related, but,
Yeah.
we had the same vision, and it wasn't until after the fact. And, that we realized it. But my mother would just walk by nonchalantly. We would go grocery shopping and, oh, la, la, la. And I would see like maybe a dead husband following, a wife, or my mother would make a comment about something. So up until that point, I really thought everybody could see things into the future as well as see dead people.
Okay.
I
So
didn't
you thought
realize
this
it
was like
wasn't
a common thing.
normal.
Really? That's
Oh, yeah, my mother
interesting.
would make remarks, "Oh, I heard Uncle John today," and, there would be, like, doors opening and closing, and, I would see, this one gentleman who would come and visit, he looked very grandfatherly, his name was Bill, so he's probably a 70-year-old looking type of spirit friend, and, we'd stop in, and I'm like, "Oh," I probably was maybe 4 or 5 at the time, so I had a lot of visitors, none of which would make my bed at the time. Just saying, spirits don't do those types of things. Just
Or
saying, they
clean
don't
up.
cook, and neither do I, right? It's something in common. If you're gonna come, at least do the bloody dishes.
Wow. So do you think that like when did you start getting that notion or that feeling of, okay, this is something that this is a talent that I have or that is or a gift, maybe. It's a gift, I think, that I have that other people don't necessarily have. When did that kind of start to come up for you?
It was probably right after my father's passing, and at the same time, my grandmother was babysitting us during, the period that he had passed, and, we never went to my father's service. Later, we found out that my mother did bury him in a blue casket just as I had seen
Wow.
psychically, and her reasoning was because of his blue eyes, but, I thought it was just normal. I at that time I saw my grandmother's or the first aura I saw and was very sparkly. She was a spiritualist. It was like a big disco party, looking at her with all this, whatever. Throughout my childhood, it wasn't something that we spoke much about with other people outside of my, inner family. I'm not the only person that has this ability on my mom's side of the family. A lot of my cousins do. I'm just one that came out, I've been outed, so to speak. So, you know, and I always saw myself doing this full time, as something that I would be practicing.
Huh.
I'll tell you, it's a little awkward when you're in or high school. I call them awkward teenage moments. When the heartthrob's father just died. You're in, it's middle school, and suddenly, you want to discuss about so and so's father because he's standing there, and the teacher calls on you, and you blurt out about his father, and you're like, oh my god, and the kid's sitting in your class. Oh yeah, I had one of those moments. So
Did you really? How did
yeah.
that pan out?
Oh, it
Like,
didn't
did
pan
people
out too
think you were
well.
did let me ask you this, because I always feel like whenever you're different, I do it with air quotes for people who are listening, when you're different and you know that you're different. That's the first question. Did you know you were different?
I didn't really think of it like that.
Okay.
I suppose I just thought of it as, just something. I never really thought of it as a gift. I just thought of it as an added extra something.
Okay.
So it was just sort of one of those things, oh yeah, I could see into the future. Oh yeah, I can, and I'm a visual type of psychic too. So
Right.
there's different, visual and hearing. I don't use cards or anything. I mean, I'm just a naturally gifted one. So I thought it was normal.
Okay.
So maybe I realized not everybody actually had the gift to the extent that I had, but I never really thought of it as anything,
Right. So
you
then
know.
the second part of that question then is when things like that happen to you, did you get like negative feedback or negative interactions with these people? Did they like, you're a weirdo? Because kids are mean.
Yep.
In even in high school, they can be really mean and spiteful. And if when they realize you're, again, air quotes, different,
Different.
they want to point that out to make themselves feel better about themselves. That's how I look at it. Where all the bullies in my past have, or people that have said nasty things towards me. So, did you have that experience where people were like picking on you or?
Um, a little bit. I had a little bit of that. I pretty much ignored it.
Okay.
It is what it is. But, and I think at the time, kids didn't really know how to respond or react in middle school. So, later I found out from, friends from, back in the day, they're like, oh, we always thought there was something unusual about you or something different, and I'm like, yeah, that would be me.
Just a little.
Yeah, I have friends. I have friends, many little friends, dead and alive, you know.
Yeah,
Just saying. I should
yeah.
have asked them to help me with my exam, so it would have made studying a lot less, cumbersome. What was I thinking? You know, Channel, Einstein, help me get that science done.
Yeah, I need that for well, for math. I think somebody for math for me because I sucked at math. It was terrible. In my high school years, all my life, math was terrible until I got out of, high school. Then all of a sudden I was like, "Oh, I'm great at bookkeeping. I'm good at finding things," That's the only time I've realized that I had that kind of talent, but it didn't help me in high school. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Anyways,
yeah.
so let me ask you this then. So you go through your childhood kind of normal, nothing crazy, no weird upsets. I mean, the loss of your father is something that's probably you said it so eloquently, so I don't how did you feel about the loss?
I knew it the night before my father passed. He said, give daddy a kiss. Mind you, I was in second grade at the time. You never know, I might not be here. And I looked at him and I knew.
Mm,
And I knew he knew because usually you'll know at some point. Now he was healthy. He just had a checkup. He was a hockey player. He was an engineer, so he's in good shape. It was just one of those things. And then the next day, he never woke up and it was just a fluke. However, he has visited me, over the years. So, I mean, it is what it is on that end. So, I live my world in two worlds, I guess, so to
yeah.
speak. I
Yeah.
tell people it's like a radio wave too. When people ask a little bit more about, I'm like, this is just like a radio wave, different frequencies.
Yeah. Yeah. I
You
was just
know?
going to say that different frequencies.
Mhm.
And I use that word
Y
frequency a lot.
If
Okay,
there's a bu
so you So childhood pretty normal, like nothing crazy. You are accepting that this is something that you have. You're not weirded out by your own abilities to be in these two frequencies, right? You're not, I mean, I just feel like I can't imagine being in a situation where I'm with or meeting somebody and I'm seeing this other world around this person and that like how do you not have like a squirrel like, "Oh, this is, oh, there's so and so is he," like, you know what I mean? Like that. And I know this could be for later in our conversation, but it's at that age to have this at a young age to have this ability and know that you have this. Like I'm just fascinated by how it didn't cause you to think you were, like, crazy or it didn't freak you out or it was just I mean, it sounds like it was just a very natural part of your existence and you just accepted it and it is what it was. But when was that moment that you kinda, like, defined of that you found a definition for what it is that you have,
It
this
was right
ability?
after Yeah, it was right after my dad died. My gram said, "You're psychic," because she would tell us psychic stories. So, like little experiences and what have you. So it was at that point. Now, the downside is my mother never really gave me any formal training on it. She would just say things so flippantly, "Oh, I saw whatever, three dead monks, I don't know, whatever, or just weird things." I'm like, "Okay, whatever." It was like, "Okay, whatever." I was never frightened of it because I have a
Okay.
really big, strong belief in God, and God created everything, including negative energies. So I was taught at that same time how to handle if I ever come across something, negative, I call it. So I just took it like anything else, it was just normal day to day. I grew up very fast, after the passing of my dad. So that was one thing that, your life shifts because you're
Mhm.
still in the physical plane. So you still have physical, requirements. You gotta, eat and you gotta, whatever.
Right.
So, but I was always sort of like, a fish out of cold water. I think it's a very common trait with psychics. You never feel part of everybody. You like a lot of people, but you're a fish out of water.
Yeah.
I was about 10 years advanced for my age, so I always looked at things at a much older grade level than what I should have been at, and a deeper, so but I was never afraid.
Right.
So
Okay.
yeah.
So you said that you were a stockbroker. So you go through your childhood and you have this ability, and it's just been integrated into your life. It's like a normal for you. So how did you end up in that profession?
So funny story. So my first year in college, I'm like, all right, I'm studying arts and science. I thought, well, maybe I'll be a plastic surgeon. And then I took a couple communication classes. I'm like, this is a lot of fun. But I was also waitressing. I was a poor kid at the time. You lose your father, you got one source of income, yada, yada, yada. We worked very hard. And I saw an advertisement to become a stockbroker. So I went down. I remember doing my interview. They gave me the book, and I was like, yeah, okay, whatever, I'll get to it. And I waited to the last minute. There's like 1,000 pages. Anyways, it's like an 85% failure rate. So like I'm like, I better study. Anyways, fast forward, I get my broker's license. Then I switch everything from science and art because I was artistically gifted. I used to draw portraits. So
Oh,
I'm like
wow.
this left, right, brain. Yeah. So my mom's artistic side, which is the psychic side, I have that. And then my dad's side, they're, just the opposite. So I became a stockbroker. So I learned how to cold call, which was the best thing ever. I learned a lot about business. I still love, that whole hustle, that, shaker and mover. It's a lot of fun. So I did that for a while. Then I thought about going to law school. So I took my LSATs, did really well, thought about corporate law. But then I got married. And then along the way, but I've always been doing like little readings. And I remember at some point I was told, you need to quit, doing what you're doing. I was in the money business at the time. And I'm like, who the heck is saying that? They said your business is going to snowball. I'm like, all right, somebody's like really aggravating me. I'm like, that's just not going to happen. The following week, I go into work and I could like out call anybody. I mean, I would do like 300 dials a day, whatever. I would just like massively call.
Just reminds
And I
me
have the
of like,
chutzpah.
have you seen that movie, The Wolf of Wall Street, where they
Oh,
did the
yeah.
whole cold calling and whatnot? I mean, I'm not trying to compare what you're doing to that, but I just remember thinking, "Oh my god, I just can't do that. I can't cold call and sell people. That's crazy."
Well, funny you should say that. I actually pitched somebody from one of the Wall Street movies years ago when I was a stockbroker. Yeah. It was like a major role, but it was just ironic, like, how my world just sort of
Oh, wow.
rolls into things. Like, there's so many coincidences, and that's when you know the universe is giving you signs, synchronistic coincidences and just oddities, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I had one of those of things last week happen to me, but anyways, fast forward. So then I ended up getting married, and then I ended up, uh, just rolling right into my business. Within a week, I ended up quitting my one job, and my business started to snowball. And I've had such weird readings. Unlike most readers that are out there, my readings can be very strange. One time a woman calls and I'm talking to her and I don't know where she is. I'm booking her appointment. I said, "Do you want Tuesday at 2, Thursday at 4, whatever?" I'm in Buffalo. She's in New York City. I said, Did you just drive by a graveyard? Your father said that." She's like, "Oh my God. Oh my God. I just drove by where my father is buried." I go, "Well, he's right in front of me. His name is Robert, da 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 da." So I said, "Pull over. I guess we get to do your reading right now." Like, I have no idea to this day, just quirky things.
Yeah. That blows my mind. I promised myself I wouldn't be like and stuck and not know what to say in this conversation because I know that you're saying
Weird.
things and I'm very much a believer in like, because I there's moments where I've been by myself maybe and there's this one story in particular. I could probably save this for later because I don't want to make this about me, but I remember seeing my aunt who passed away.
Oh,
Um I was coming home at like 3 o'clock in the morning from a shift I used to work at a hotel in West Palm Beach. And I remember this person was hitchhiking. And I saw this person. And that person, when I drove by, just stared at me and watched me drive by. And I was like, oh my God, that looks like my aunt. And I remember thinking, she's dead. There's no way, but I remember I did a U-E and drove back, person was gone.
gone.
Gone,
Yep,
gone.
ghost.
And I was just like, "What?" And it freaked me out for days, I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I was like, "Did I make the?" I thought that I was making this up. I thought, I'm tired, long shift, I did double shift that day, I'm tired, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm making this up, it can't be. So for a long time, I just pushed it to the back burner, but then, you have, like, these moments where you just feel like I just saw this thing walk by, like, it was just weird, and I'm not trying to, like, weird anybody out, but I'm like, I sense, like, there's this presence, and I don't push it off anymore, I don't question it anymore, I used to, but it hasn't happened to me in a long time, but and when I was younger, it did happen. I would be alone in my house, and this dark thing would walk by, and I'd be like, "What was that?" And it would freak me out. And I was like, that's why I was asking you earlier, did you get, like, weirded out by these abilities to see these things and people are just, talking to you and sharing like it's so nonchalant, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, yeah, I just took it as normal, but you actually did have a visitor that was your aunt trying to get your attention, and I tell people it takes a lot of energy for spirit people to project that.
Yeah.
So if you sense it, you feel it, always go with your first instinct,
Huh.
and you'll
Interesting.
definitely be right about that. And just don't tell your doctor you see, dead people or hear voices in your head. He might be like, "Take these magic pills." I have done it, but they know who I am, and, Yeah. Be a lot
That's
of fun that
hilarious.
way.
That's weird. So you end up okay, so you end up it sounds to me because I'm every time I have these discussions, you ladies gloss over this moment of so I want to back up to the stockbroker. Things are going fine. You're doing this. You're pretty successful at it. Everything's kind of lining up
It's fun.
with this.
Mhm.
You're enjoying it. I'm assuming making money considering you were so successful at doing what you're doing and you get married and whatnot. What if anything, was that nudge or that I told you earlier before we started, that shock. For some people, it's like a shock to their system, like, "Oh my god, this doesn't work for me anymore. I'm not happy." Like for myself, it was a nudge. I felt the voices in my head were
Mhm.
just telling me, "What more do you need? What other signs do you need before you just do what you need to do and get on the right path," right? What was
Mhm.
that moment for you?
So it was just a nudge, my psychic impressions. I was told by my guides, for lack of a better word, that we're going to push you out of your business and your business will snowball. And I'm like, no, 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 no. And they're like, yes, 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 yes. And I'm like, no, 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 no. And I'd get them in my dreams, and this went on for a couple of weeks. And I'm like, yeah, no. And they said, no, next week you're going to be done. And what ended up happening, I remember I had said to a friend of mine at work, I said, I just did, like, I don't know, 50 calls. And, it was, like, within a half hour. Well, then I got called in the office. They're like, "You're not on the phone." I go, "Yes, I am." And I called in no, actually, it was 100 calls. And I said, "Hang on." I said, "Deb, come here. How many calls did I tell you that I did?" She goes, "She just did 100 calls. I just listened to her because our desks were, next to each other." And they're like, "It's not showing up on our system," which spirit will actually, the spirit realm will play with anything electronic. That's why sometimes you might get, like, something popping up on your phone that reminds you of, like, maybe your father in the spirit world trying to get a hold of you, or maybe, you're getting some sort of whatever disruption. Maybe
Right.
you're turning on television or whatever. So at that point in time, I said, no, actually, I did this. And then we got into a little bit of an argument. I go, you know what? I don't need this nonsense because basically, I don't play games with little boys in short pants. Just saying, you know, or girls, whatever, if you're whatever side you're on,
Whatever.
I don't really care. Life is too bloody short.
Of
I'm nice,
course.
but. And so, I walked out and literally like the following week, my business started to snowball. And it was a calling too. And, so word got out and the rest is history. And then I, was approached to do a TV show. I was chosen one out of, I think there was 1,200 applicants and you had to do a test screen. So they did a ton of test screens. So myself and one other person were selected. But it was even weirder than that because I'm known for names, numbers, dates, and times. And I remember hearing, the first and the last name associated with this particular production. So when I got this odd call, next thing I know, I was rolled into national TV.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and that was a prediction. Yeah. So
So literally this just exploded for you.
it did. Like
But
Reese's Pieces exploded. Sorry. With my two names, and they're
Karen,
not hooked on phonics,
that's
yeah.
hilarious. Um, so you basically you heeded the call. I mean, you knew. I mean, I almost like to think in your case, and I just correct me if I'm wrong. Like even though you resisted the call to the adventure, so to speak, you were resistant to it because this is what you were doing, stockbroking. You were successful at it. Why would I leave this to go into something that is not unknown because you have this ability, but you don't know where this business is going to come from either, right? Or did you feel
Exactly.
like because I know in some of the questions that we ask, because we ask a lot of questions that are based on like the hero's journey, like we have mentors and we have people that come into our life that are there to give us guidance. And you mentioned, your guides, so that your guides were the ones that were sort of steering you in this direction.
Yeah, they're a little lame. I fired one of them. Just saying. He was always grumpy. He still comes around, but, as far as, like, the actual applications in the more earthly plane, that was something that I had to navigate because there was really no, mentor,
Okay.
about establishing this type of business and how to market it because it's a whole different type of animal.
Yeah.
But fortunately, I feel that having a degree in business, and even though I'd started in one path, the universe had something greater. So I became a stockbroker. So I switched everything to business. So I had an understanding of cold calling and having the chutzpah and the, whatever
Mhm.
that it takes. So I had that understanding, so I will blame that on the universe. So, but I did navigate on my own. I, created my own business. Nobody ever gave me, a handout. Nobody ever said, this is how you do it. Here's your roadmap.
Right.
And for me, I don't use cards. I don't use any tools. I see like little TV screens, or I'll actually see a spirit person. So I could see somebody's, past, present, future, like a movie or pictures,
Yeah.
as well as that. So yeah, my world's just really weird. Reese's Pieces,
No. Do you
it's
think
weird.
did you have any I mean, I know that you had this sense of, business background and you had that ability to navigate this on your own. Do you, what kind of like, did you have any challenges, any obstacles? I mean, being in, like, the limelight, I would have I'm assuming people wanna take advantage. People are you may not get good advice or did you have any negative experiences with people, with situations? Like, what challenges did you encounter?
That's a good question. So people are people. So, you'd run up against, I've had different experiences with people. Some always are on the take. What can they get from you?
Yeah.
Then you have people that because of the nature of the work that I do, you get the religious zealots and they want to, whatever, pound you to the stake. That's why I don't eat steak because I was pounded on a stake in a past life, burned at a stake. Don't eat
Okay.
meat, but just saying. But, so you get like that realm, so you do get some of the crazy people. So if it's not one or the other, or you get the people that they're like, I don't believe in it. And I'm like, that's fine. To each
Right.
his own. It's not my job to convince you. I don't really care. Do your
Right.
own thing.
Mhm.
God gave you a brain. So those would be the challenges. And I think human nature, sometimes I think when you're a psychic medium, they think that you're airy fairy. So they have their own belief systems because of whatever they watch TV. So they either think you're very airy fairy or you should know everything about them. And I tell people it's a snippet in time when you tune in with people. I mean, you have a whole life, you've only got a short period and you're not always on either. I'm at the grocery store and I've had people pin me up against the cucumber stand, tell me something. Yeah, let me out. I need to get tomatoes.
Wow. That's
So you get
crazy.
sort of weirdness.
Yeah, I can imagine that you have had quite a few, experiences that where you've been like, "Tell me," because people don't they wanna believe, they got their foot like, one foot in the water, the other one's out. They wanna know, and they wanna hear something so that you can prove that you are who
Mhm.
you are. Did you have a lot of instances where you've had to, like, go above and beyond to prove that you have this ability, or did you just not care? It sounds to me like you're so confident in your abilities and what you're doing, especially since this has been a lifelong thing, right?
Mhm.
And you've be you've had success in this, um, business, if you will, and with your talents. So, did you feel when you first started to do this and you broke out on your own and started doing your own things that you had to prove your worth to people? Did you ever question your sense of self? Like, did you ever have, moments where you're like, I don't know if this is for me. I don't know if I should be doing that. Like, I don't, what do you make out of that? Because sometimes I think people are like, judgmental in terms of you shouldn't be monetizing on this or you shouldn't be doing that or you're playing with people's feelings or you might be you know what I mean? I'm not even sure if I'm asking the question correctly, but I'm just curious if you had those sort of instances where people really challenged you and what you do. You know what I mean?
I've had so many different people over the course of the years. And, fortunately, I love it when people, they want that because I'm like, I'm not here to prove it. And oftentimes when I read, I'll say a couple like little things. I always validate something. So, I'm in your energy,
Yeah.
whether it's your mother's best friend and her name and is whatever, Sabrina, and she's got a problem with her foot, like things I just wouldn't know. And I always tell people too, sometimes when people challenge me, I'm like, you know what? It's not my job. So, you've been given information. I mean, I had somebody recently who I stated her father's middle name, first name, what else? There's something or something kooky he used to call her. He had died when she was a kid, similar, circumstances and some other things. A number associated with him because he liked a certain number for some sort of a sports, I think it was football. I don't follow a lot of sports, but that being said, and needless to say, she goes, tell me one other thing. And I said, well, I've just said a bunch of other things, you're going to upset your father. I
Yeah.
didn't know all this, so
Yeah.
it is what it is. Then we laughed about it because then she realized, another instance, family member. Actually, this happened recently. A friend of mine, she says, "I'm going to the casino. What should I play?" I said, "Oh, you want to play Bewitched?" And my guides were laughing when I heard that. I go, "Play it. You're going to win." I haven't been to this casino in 7 years, and she won. My uncle, another case, probably 10 years ago, my mom called. Oh, Uncle Patty's going to Vegas. I said, I don't see him winning, but I see these 5 out of 7 numbers on a lottery ticket. So he came back from Vegas, lost played the 5 out of 7 numbers and won, and I tell people that's what he was meant to get, which brings me back to when I do my readings, I always validate and you get what you're supposed to get at the time of the reading. Look, you can always change it. That's entirely up to you.
Right.
But if somebody doesn't believe, they don't believe. But usually 9 times out of 10 they do because they'll be like, well, I don't know what to tell you because I don't go out of my way to make them believe because the information is spot on enough that if they don't believe, then there's nothing more you can do.
Right.
You know?
That's
So you
interesting.
get all walks of life, and honestly, I'm like, "Whatever," you
Yeah.
know? Yeah, you're supposed to get this.
Yeah. That's crazy. So, based on all of the things that you have done to date, what what did you learn from all of these experiences that you've had, of course, to date? Because we're I mean, for me, I'm continually learning, and I'm sure you are too. Is there anything that you I don't know, that you gained, any lessons from this quest, if you will? Anything that you've gotten that you feel, um, inspire other people at this point in your life? You know what I mean? There are other people
Yep.
out there that are much younger who have abilities such as yourself or even other types of abilities, and what is it that you can provide to these people or inspire these people with in terms of your journey? And how are you bringing that and, integrating that into what you are doing currently?
So that's a really good question. So there's two things that I always say: treat people the way you want to be treated. Most people, we all want the same thing. We all put our pants on the same way. So if we treat people and animals the way we want to be treated,
Animals.
then you'll see, yeah,
I
I
love it.
always have animals. Yeah, I'm
That's
big
right.
about animals. Test on criminals, not on animals. That's a whole nother conversation. So
Next interview.
yeah, next interview, we can get into that. And you can, and paying attention because you can learn, right? Because a lot of times people will come in and we can learn, even if we don't like them, there's always a lesson.
Yeah,
And then the second thing I always tell people, you always want to make sure you maintain your balance, right? So live your life, know you can make changes, know that you don't have to fight people to gain. You have the power within and you have the brains, and sometimes you got to pivot, and sometimes changes are really great because what those the challenges that we get, it teaches us about ourselves. Life is a game, it's a strategy. So how are we going to play this game?
right,
What's our next strategy? Right now everybody's like, so, a lot of people are depressed and whatever. I'm like, get out of your depression, let's talk about strategy.
right.
For those that love you, love you. For those that don't, don't. What are you going to do? Let's talk about a strategy. So those would be some of the things that I, would recommend. And here's the other thing too. Thoughts are things. So what you think about, you can manifest. So
Yeah,
there's a professor, Japanese, I believe. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but he had people where they would hold bottled waters and think positive thoughts. And then he had the same with people holding bottles of waters with negative thoughts. And under the microscope, he can see the differences, with the negative thoughts, jagged edges, after he froze the water, of course.
yeah.
And with the positive thoughts, he could see, beautiful, like little flaky things.
Huh, interesting.
So, yeah, and then they've done things too with research where they've taken, cancer cells and they've seen it translate into like acid rock, where healthy cells translate into classical. So everything is connected. There's a vibrational quality. So trying to think in terms of strategy, get stuck, think of a strategy. There's
Right.
always ways to pivot. Thoughts are things. So
I
we have the
agree.
power within,
Yeah,
you know.
totally,
Yeah.
totally. I agree. I feel like, it's one of the things that I'm, not struggling, but I'm getting from a lot of the people that I'm talking to is that this we all have this energy, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And how we channel that energy is is significant if you can pay attention to how you're allowing that energy to come out of you,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
Because you're right. I think that there is that. I was just reading this book, Ask and It Is Given. I think it's by I know it's by Esther and Jerry Hicks, and
It's good.
Abraham. You know how they connect to this. So I'm feeling it because I believe that our thoughts are very powerful
Uh-huh.
and they can make or break, you know what I mean? And so if we can channel that into what you're saying, which is strategy, thinking about that, it changes your process of thinking, right? So what is it that you are doing today based on everything that you've done, everything that you've learned, people that you've met, challenges, obstacles, triumphs that you're doing now? Like, what is it how does your ability help people?
Um, when people get stuck in an emotional crisis or just plain stuck for whatever reason, I help to facilitate a strategy. I help to motivate them. I help to let them see that there is still light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes we lose that. When we become victims, we lose ourselves. And so what I'll do oftentimes is combine, I see this in the future, which is a path you can take or you can change it. If you keep doing what you do, 90% of the times people will take it. However, or, you might have like maybe your mother here coaching you on, telling you, I just had this happen over the weekend. I normally don't do, on the spot readings, when I'm out publicly because you never know. You don't want to offend anybody or you don't want to, cause yourself to get injured. But I happened to run across a woman and we started talking and I said, oh yeah. And I've actually got her video, beautiful girl, Carly, and not expecting a reading. And, so we're moving, into a more positive place. And that happens, quite a bit because I think we're all here to raise our awareness, to raise everybody. We come in to raise the awareness. Now, that doesn't mean doing the work for other people, but it does say, it does mean, the power of thought, the power of strategy, and getting people to know you have that power. You're not a victim.
Right.
The minute you get out of the blame game and the victimhood and you take, ownership, even when people do negative to you,
Right.
you take that ownership and say, okay, I don't like what you did, but I've got to come up with a solution, a strategy
Right. Right.
and putting that power out. That's when you really start to make an inroad. And sometimes I think we forget about that. That's why you get a lot of depression, a lot of people have anxiety. They just don't know how to navigate.
Yeah.
And we've
Yeah.
all been down that way. Again, it's the game of life. We come here to learn about ourselves. It's why we're given challenges. And people sometimes don't realize that what is the purpose of life? It really is to test our being.
Yeah.
Are you going to be kind to a stranger? Because you don't know if that's an angel in disguise. You're going to, give them $2, or is this person somebody that needs, some help? Maybe they're a meth addict.
Right. Right.
Either case, what are you going to do? Are you going to ignore them? Are you going to walk over somebody or are you going to call for help?
Yeah.
And sometimes we got to put more of that human compassion into that. Doesn't mean we have to do the work though. We got to have those boundaries, but it does
Yeah.
mean that we can, reach out because at the end of the day, we all put our pants on it. And at the end of the day,
For
we're all going
sure.
to see God. I actually had a near death 15 years ago. Now I go out of body all the time.
Wow.
And yeah, and,
You just
they
missed
made
that.
me,
You
I know,
missed
let
that
me
in the
tell you.
interview.
Yeah. Had to come
Oh,
back. Yeah.
oh,
So,
wow. That's
yeah.
crazy.
So, yeah. And they were like, you have to come back. And so that was my world. But yeah,
Right.
here I am. Reese, you got to go back. Groundhog's Day.
So let me ask you this then. I think that's beautiful. I think that you've taken a lot of time to really hone in on your skills and your abilities and these, I mean, I call them gifts, um, and turned it into something that is really thoughtful and very helpful to other people. And I think that that's something to be, I mean, I'm grateful for that. Anytime I meet somebody and they're making an impact in their surroundings or in their environment and sharing what they have with other people to raise that self-awareness that we are all connected and that we're all human and that we all have the strength and abilities inside of us to
Hmm.
change our frequencies, right? And our energy output. And so I think that's beautiful. And I thank you for that. I think that's great. But so now if somebody wanted to get in touch with you and learn more about what you do or connect with you, how would they go about doing that?
Probably the easiest would be my website, which is Karyn Reece, spelled KarynReece.com, where it has, or Karyn Reece at Instagram, Facebook, all of the above, TikTok. But you got to look for the check mark.
Thank you for listening to the ASQ podcast. Remember to lead your life, shape your culture, begin within. Subscribe now and join the movement.